Stop for a moment and answer me with quiet honesty. What exactly is disappearing from your life lately? It wasn't all at once. It wasn't dramatic. It was subtle, almost invisible. Things that once seemed essential began to lose momentum. Discussions no longer have the same flavor. Some people no longer have the same effect. Fears that once overwhelmed you, now they seem distant, like echoes of an old version of her. And perhaps the strangest is that you don't feel loss. You feel space, interior space, silence, clarity. What if I told you that this is not a crisis? It is not isolation. It's not emotional coldness. It's transition. Because when one enters the fifth dimension of consciousness, it is not the world that changes first. It is what ceases to exist within it. And what disappears, he never comes back in the same way. Now mentally list 3 things that were everything in your life 2 years ago, and today they simply no longer exist. Not because you chose to, because they disappeared. This is no accident, it is 5th dimensional physics, and it will happen with 7 more things, automatically. You've probably noticed that something has changed, but no one warned you that this was it. People who were part of your life every day simply left life without explanation. Desires that seemed part of who you are evaporated out of nowhere. Environments that you frequented for years began to weigh in a way that didn't make sense. And the most disturbing part, you didn't choose any of that. It happened. And it's going to keep happening, because when a person comes into 5D consciousness, 7 things automatically disappear and they never go back the way they were. Here's the paradox that most fail to see. What disappears isn't the best you have. It's what kept you hooked. The invisible changes that happen in your energy field during dimensional awakening are not punishment. They are not bad luck. They are not phase. They are energetic cleansing operating at a high level, removing all that is incompatible with the higher vibration you are achieving. The problem is that, without understanding what is happening, the person interprets the ascension as a loss and tries to hold on to exactly what they should let go. In this video, you will discover the 7 things that disappear when you enter high frequency, and why trying to maintain them is the biggest obstacle to everything you are trying to reach. It is not surface content. This is what is happening to you now, with name, explanation, and above all, direction. If while you read this, something has already made sense, if something inside you has recognized what was said, comments here number 7. Because this number is not just the amount of things that disappear, it is the symbol of those who are already in the middle of the transformation and will finally understand what they are experiencing. Have you ever stopped to look around and realize that certain things have simply disappeared? It wasn't a decision, it wasn't a fight, it wasn't a farewell ritual. People who were a constant presence in his life evaporated. Habits that seemed impossible to break ceased to exist as if they had never been yours. Desires that moved you, that hunger for approval, that need to always be surrounded by people, that vice disguised as personality, simply stopped making sense. And the most curious thing, you barely noticed when it happened. This is not an accident, coincidence, or phase of life. What is happening has a name, a logic, and a direction. When a person begins to operate at a high frequency, what many call 5D consciousness, the energy field they carry changes its nature, and everything that vibrated at a frequency incompatible with this new earth that she is building within herself begins to leave life almost automatically. It is not a choice, it's physical. It's like trying to tune an AM radio to a device that only picks up FM. It's not that you don't want to hear it, it's that the signal just doesn't reach anymore. And here begins something that no one warns you about. This process of dimensional awakening is not just about what comes into your life. It is, first of all, about what disappears. 7 specific things disappear when you enter that higher vibration. and they never come back the way they were. Some call it loss. Those who have crossed call it liberation. Before judging, it is worth understanding what is disappearing from your life and why. There's a question that almost everyone asks when they start going through this process. Why can't I just fit in the places I've always been anymore? The answer is not in psychology. It is not in an existential crisis, and much less in a passing phase. It is in the physical, or rather, in the spiritual physical. The fifth dimension operates in a frequency of love and unity, and everything that has been built on fear, lack, or separation literally no longer fits into your energy field. It's not that you've become arrogant, difficult, or boring. It's just that the vibrational mismatch between what you were and what you're becoming has created an invisible filter that no one has taught you to recognize. Think of it this way. Imagine that your energy is like a state-of-the-art stereo, calibrated to capture very high frequencies. Now he tries to shove an old cassette into it. It doesn't fit. It's not the cassette's fault. It's not the device's fault. It's simply format incompatibility. What vibrated in 3D, everything that was sustained by drama, validation, fear, and control, begins to sound static. You try to hear, and you only hear noise. This is the time when relationships fade, environments become too heavy, and old habits stop working without you having made a conscious effort to let go of them. What few understand is that this is not a collapse, it is an energetic cleansing. It's your system doing what every healthy system does, rejecting what no longer serves to maintain balance. It is not tragedy, it is removal of illusions. It is not loneliness, it is sacred emptying before real fulfillment. And the actual fill can only get in when the space is free. The point is that, before seeing what is coming, most people only feel the weight of what is going away. And that is exactly where the biggest misunderstanding of the entire ascension lies. There's a kind of friendship that most people carry for years without realizing how much it weighs. It's that relationship that only exists when there's a problem to solve, gossip to comment on, or drama to feed. When everything is fine, the person disappears. When life turns into a soap opera, she appears in the front row. And for a long time, this seemed normal. After all, a friend is for these times, isn't it? But when dimensional awakening begins, something strange happens. These conversations become empty. You try to participate and feel like you're watching a looped movie you've seen 1,000 times. The energy that sustained it collapses, and the vibrational mismatch does the work on its own. The most telling thing is that you don't have to cut anyone off. There is no fight, there is no speech, there is no dramatic closing conversation. People just walk out of life. Or you realize that without drama as fuel, there's no real connection there. It's like finding out that two friends only had something to talk about because they complained about the same boss. The job changes, the friendship ends. In 5D consciousness, relationships based on need, on savior and victim dynamics, on codependency masquerading as love, naturally evaporate because you stop providing the energy that kept them alive. And this, at first, may seem lonely, but it is not. What remains after these bonds disappear is something that many people have never really experienced: real connection. That relationship where neither of them needs the other to feel whole, but they choose to be together because they mutually nourish each other. Are they few? They are. But the quality of one of these relationships is worth more than 50 drama-based ones. And there's something quiet going on as you read this. A part of you already knows exactly what relationships we're talking about, and you already feel like they're losing the weight they once did. He has an addiction that is quieter than any other, and almost no one admits that he has it. It is the addiction of verifying. Check if they liked it, if they approved, if they agreed, if they thought it was beautiful, intelligent, relevant. It's waking up in the morning and already mentally rehearsing what you're going to post, how you're going to dress, what you're going to say, all calibrated to pass the filter of what others will think. Does it seem exaggerated? Think about how many decisions you've made or not made because you've wondered how someone else will react. This need for external validation is one of the deepest patterns of 3D vibration, and it consumes an absurd amount of energy that could be used to build something real. When the high frequency starts to set in, something subtle but powerful happens. You post something and realize that you weren't waiting for a reaction. He makes a decision and notes that he did not do that internal research of what they will find. Other people's opinions don't disappear from the world. They simply cease to be the thermometer of your life. It becomes information, not determination. It's a small difference in description, but huge in experience. It's as if you've spent years driving with your eye in the rear-view mirror and suddenly discover that you can look straight ahead. The authentic freedom that comes from this is priceless, and it doesn't need to be announced to anyone, because whoever got there doesn't need to prove anything anymore. The curious thing is that when the need for approval disappears, the people around often interpret it as coldness, arrogance, or distance, but it's not like that at all. He is simply someone who has found a quiet certainty about his or her own worth without needing anyone to confirm it. It's not that the person has stopped caring about others. It's just that she stopped getting lost in others. And there's a huge difference between living your life and living the approved version of it. What disappears here is not the connection. It is the dependence. And when the dependence goes away, it makes room for something that goes far beyond approval. There is a skill that most people have developed from an early age and carry as if it were a virtue: the ability to endure. To endure the work that drains, the family reunion that shrinks, the group of friends that tires. For years, this was called maturity, responsibility, even love. That's just the way it is. Life is hard. But there is a moment in the ascension process when this ability simply stops working. It is not a decision. It is not a limit consciously established in a diary of self-knowledge. It is the body that refuses. It is an involuntary physical repulsion that appears even before the thought. And here comes the detail that scares those who still don't understand what's happening. The symptoms are real. Headache that appears every time you enter a specific environment. Nausea before a meeting with a certain person. Deep exhaustion after events you previously attended without thinking. The nervous system, calibrated now to a higher vibration, begins to act as an antenna and picks up toxicity in the body before the mind rationalizes anything. It is not weakness. It is energetic sensitivity operating at a high level, and it is one of the clearest signs that something is really changing in your frequency. The problem is that this radical selectivity that emerges has a social cost. People around don't understand. They call it freshness, exaggeration. You've changed too much. And maybe you yourself wonder if you are not being too difficult, too isolated, too demanding. But here's an honest question. If your body is literally getting sick in one environment, what exactly are you preserving by staying there? Tolerance to the drug was never a virtue. It was survival disguised as strength. And when that tolerance disappears, what remains is something that goes far beyond simply choosing better environments. Of all the forces that keep a person stuck in the 3D vibration, the fear of death is probably the oldest and the quietest. It doesn't just appear when someone thinks about dying. It appears in every decision postponed for fear of making mistakes, in every relationship maintained for fear of being alone, in every dream shelved for fear of failure. The fear of the future and the fear of death are deep down the same thing, the terror of losing control over what comes next. And this terror consumes an absurd amount of vital energy, keeping the person in a chronic state of anxiety that he learns to call realism. When dimensional awakening deepens, this fear is not vanquished. It simply loses its power. And there is a huge difference between overcoming fear and it ceasing to exist as a threat. It's not forced courage, it's not practiced stoicism, it's not mantra repeated every morning. It is a genuine peace that comes from an inner experience that does not fit well in words. The feeling of being something much bigger than the body. Those who go through this don't believe that they are eternal consciousness, and when you know, death becomes transition, the future becomes an interesting mystery, and control becomes a useless effort that you abandon without drama. What stands in the place of fear is full presence, and this is perhaps the most valuable exchange of the whole process. Because when the future stops being a threat, the only place where life really happens becomes accessible: the now. It is not a concept of a self-help book. It's a noticeable change in everyday life. You stop in the middle of an ordinary moment, a coffee, a conversation, a walk, and feel the weight of being completely there. Impermanence, which once seemed like tragedy, becomes beauty. And interestingly, it is exactly when the person stops trying to control everything that the truest things begin to appear. There is a scene that almost everyone who goes through this process describes in a similar way. You open a website, you go to that product that had been on your wish list for months, that thing you swore you needed that would make you feel complete, organized, successful, and you feel nothing. Zero will, zero need. It's as if the object has lost the ability to promise you something. And then you close the tab and get confused for a few seconds because you don't know if you've gotten wiser or if you've simply broken something inside you. Spoiler, it didn't break anything. On the contrary, consumerism was never about the objects themselves. It was always about the void they promised to fill. The new bag that was going to make you feel valued. The car that was going to prove that you got there. The renovation of the house that was finally going to bring that feeling that life was in place. In 5D vibration, this emptiness ceases to exist, and when the emptiness disappears, the object's promise completely loses its power. What happens naturally, without effort, without the Marie Kondo method, without a spreadsheet of expenses, is a movement of sacred emptying. You begin to donate, to detach, to simplify. Not because he read that he should, because it genuinely doesn't make sense to carry so much anymore. What remains is a lightness that goes beyond the organized wardrobe or the balanced bank account. It's an existential lightness, the feeling that you don't need anything external to be whole. And paradoxically, it's exactly when you stop seeking completeness in things that you begin to attract experiences and connections of a quality that no object could ever offer. Simplicity is not poverty of spirit, it is sophistication of conscience. And there is something even deeper that disappears along with consumerism, something that most people don't even realize they carry as an identity. There is a silent test that reveals a lot about how often a person operates, how they feel when someone close to them achieves something great. A promotion, an amazing relationship, a business that took off, a transformed body. The instinctive reaction, the one that appears before the social filter kicks in, says it all. And for a long time, for most people, this reaction was carried with an uncomfortable weight. A twinge of envy, an automatic comparison, a subtle feeling that the success of the other somehow diminished their space in the world. That's pure 3D vibration. And it's not a character flaw, it's scarcity programming running in the background. When 5D consciousness sets in, something that seemed impossible begins to happen naturally. You see someone shining and feel genuine joy. Not the performative joy of those who learned that you have to cheer for others. It is a joy that comes from a deeper place, from a real realization that we are all part of the same plot, and that someone's success does not occupy the space that would be theirs, because that space is not finite. Competition is starting to look like what it always has been, an illusion built on the belief that there isn't enough for everyone. And when this belief collapses, envy loses its function, and the triggers that once consumed you simply evaporate. What emerges in place is something that transforms not only how you see others, but how you build together with them. Collaboration instead of competition. Celebration in the place of comparison. Radical compassion in place of judgment. And there's a powerful side effect of all this. When you stop spending energy competing, that energy is available to create, to build, to evolve. People who have reached this point are no longer threatened by the brilliance of others. They use that brilliance as inspiration. And interestingly, it's exactly when you stop trying to beat others that you start beating yourself. Every addiction has a function. This is what no one talks about when it comes to self-destructive behavior. The alcohol that anesthetizes anxiety. The emotional food that fills the void after an exhausting day. Procrastination that avoids confronting the fear of not being good enough. Repeated toxic relationships that confirm an old belief about what you deserve. Every destructive pattern a person carries exists because at some point it solved a problem, or at least created the illusion that it did. And as long as the function exists, the pattern survives, no matter how many promises of change are made at the turn of the year. That's why willpower alone has never been enough to break deep addictions. You don't break a pattern by trying not to repeat it. You dissolve it when the function it fulfilled is no longer necessary. And this is exactly what happens in higher vibration. The full presence that comes with dimensional awakening eliminates the need for escape. When you're completely present in yourself, you don't need anesthesia. When the inner emptiness is filled with something real, emotional food loses its appeal. When procrastination tries to kick in, the presence doesn't allow for escape, and the pattern simply stops working. The body refuses, the mind refuses, the whole system rejects what was once automatic. What remains in place is not rigid discipline or a list of healthy habits stuck on the refrigerator. It is self-love operating in a natural way, the one that makes you take care of the body not out of obligation, but because it is the temple where your consciousness dwells. That makes you choose presence over flight, growth over stagnation, not because someone told you to, but because any other choice just doesn't make sense anymore. And here lies the biggest paradox of this whole process. You spend your life trying to quit what makes you sick, and when it finally happens, it wasn't you who quit it. It was the addiction that lost the address. There is a moment in the middle of this process that is simultaneously the most confusing and the most liberating of the entire journey. It is when the person looks at everything that has disappeared, the relationships, the habits, the desires, the identities, and feels a genuine mourning for things that deep down were destroying them. And that's not weakness, it's human. Because no matter how toxic something is, when it takes up space in your life for years, its absence creates an eerie silence, a silence that feels like loss before it looks like freedom. Removing illusions hurts like real loss until you realize that what's gone away was never really yours. Here's the reframe that changes everything. What disappeared wasn't real in the deep sense of the word. It was a 3D structure, temporary, built on fear, sustained by illusion. The masks you wore to be accepted were not you. The need for validation was not his essence. The drama in relationships was not connection. They were crutches, prisons, scaffolding of a version of you that was under construction. And when the scaffolding falls, it looks like the building collapsed. But in fact, it was the scaffolding that went away, and what was left standing is the real structure. You, expanded, free, whole, without the armor you thought you needed to survive. The sacred emptying, that precedes the actual fulfillment is the most misunderstood chapter of the entire ascension. People stare into the void and conclude that something has gone wrong. But emptiness is not an end. It is preparation. It is the soil being cleaned before planting. It is silence before music. Each thing that disappears makes room for what is true to enter, and what is true has a completely different quality from anything that was there before. It is not quantity, it is density of meaning. And there is something that almost no one talks about this process. There are days when you miss what went away, even though you know it was poison. It would be dishonest to say that this path is only lightness and expansion all the time. There are days when a strange nostalgia hits, a longing not for specific people, not for specific habits, but for a time when life seemed simpler. When the rules were clear, the group was large, the weekend was predictable, and no one expected you to be deep into anything. This longing is real, and it deserves to be validated without guilt. Missing what has gone away doesn't mean you've taken a mistake. It means you're human, going through a transition that few around you can understand. But here is an honest question. One of those we ask ourselves when no one is looking. Do you really want to go back? Do you want to go back to the constant need for external validation, checking likes to see if it has value? Do you want to go back to relationships sustained by drama, where the connection only existed when there was a problem? Do you want to go back to the paralyzing fear of the future, to the tolerance of the drug, to the addictions that anesthetized what you didn't want to feel? When the answer appears with sincerity, it is almost always no. What one misses is not the content of one's old life, it's one's companionship. It's not making this journey alone. And this is the kindest insight there is about this process. The loneliness that appears in dimensional awakening is not a sign that you have lost too much. It is a sign that you are between frequencies. You have already left a place and have not yet found everyone who vibrates where you have arrived. This is temporary. The real connections that the new earth brings are different in quality from anything that has come before. But they do require a time of arrival. Longing, when observed honestly, does not ask for return. It asks for patience. And there's something that makes this weight much lighter when you understand why all this happens so automatically. One of the things that generates the most unnecessary guilt in this process is the belief that the person should be doing something to change, that I should be working harder, meditating more, reading more, being more disciplined. And then, when the changes happen without apparent effort, when the addiction disappears without a fight, when the toxic relationship dissolves without confrontation, when fear loses its power without intense therapy, there is confusion. Did I do it, or did it happen on my own? The answer is, it happened, because you changed frequency and the vibrational mismatch did the rest. It wasn't willpower, it was physical, spiritual. Think of a person who spent years living in a noisy city and got used to chaos. One day she moves to a quiet place, and the noise that was once normal becomes unbearable during visits. She didn't decide to hate the noise. Her nervous system recalibrated and began to reject what she once tolerated. This is exactly how ascension works. When 5D consciousness sets in, the energy field expands, and everything that operated in a lower vibration simply cannot exist there anymore. There's no point in trying to keep what's gone. It's like trying to force that noisy city to look quiet. The system rejects because the incompatibility is real, not imagined. This understanding changes everything because it takes the weight of mistaken responsibility. You're not leaving people behind. You're not being hard. You are not overreacting. You are responding to a law that operates independently of your conscious will. Just as a magnet does not choose what it attracts and what it repels, it simply obeys its own nature. And when you stop trying to explain, justify, or reverse what is happening, There is energy left for something much more interesting, understanding what is coming in place of what has gone. After everything that disappears, after the sacred emptying, after the strangeness of emptiness, comes fulfillment. And it is so different from what existed before that at first one hardly recognizes it as abundance, because life in higher vibration is no longer noisy, it is no longer crowded with people, it is no longer hectic with constant novelties, it is dense with meaning. A single conversation that goes deep is worth more than 100 superficial conversations. A moment of genuine inner peace weighs more than a whole week of distractions. The quality of what comes in is so different from the quantity of what goes out that it seems, for a while, that life has shrunk, when in fact, it has expanded. What comes after the collapse of 3D structures has simple but profound names. Real relationships, where neither of them needs to perform to be accepted. Inner peace that does not depend on external circumstances, the one that remains even when the day is difficult. Authentic freedom to live without the weight of other people's approval. Full presence that transforms ordinary moments into complete experiences. Self-love that doesn't need to be built every day from scratch because it has become a natural state. It's not utopia. It's the concrete result of an energy field that has stopped leaking energy in directions that didn't work. And there is a detail that only those who arrived here can describe accurately. Life in a new land is not perfect, but it is true. And true weight different from perfect. You still face challenges, you still have difficult days, you still feel pain. But pain is no longer accompanied by the weight of illusion, unnecessary drama, paralyzing fear. It comes clean, irons, and leaves something in place. And perhaps the greatest gift of this whole process is not what you have earned, but the clarity on how to honor and preserve what has arrived without letting the old come back through the back door. There is a difference between going through a transformation and honoring it. Most people go through it, suffer, resist, question, and one day look back and realize that they have changed without having fully understood what happened. Honoring is different. It is to be present in the process. It is to treat each thing that goes away with the seriousness of someone who knows that he is facing something sacred. And that starts with a simple but powerful practice. Don't try to hold on to what's going away. When a relationship begins to dissolve naturally, when a habit loses its appeal, when an environment begins to weigh down, the first practice is to let go. Do not push, do not accelerate, but do not hold on either. The second practice is perhaps the most counterintuitive of all, giving thanks. Not in a performative way, not in a forced ritual, but in an honest acknowledgement that everything that is coming out of life has taught something. The toxic relationship taught her about her own limits. The addiction showed where there was pain that needed to be seen. Fear revealed where there was belief that needed to be questioned. To be thankful is not to say that it was good. It is to recognize that it was necessary. And when you can look at what goes away with gratitude instead of resentment, energetic cleansing happens in a much cleaner and more complete way. The third practice is to trust in emptiness, and this is the most difficult because it goes against everything that the conditioned mind knows. Emptiness looks like error, it looks like failure, it looks like loneliness, but it is sacred. It is the space between what was and what is coming. Observe without judgment what disappears. Celebrate the space being created. Be kind to yourself during the transition, because kindness to yourself in times of transformation is not weakness, it is wisdom. And when you learn to treat emptying with care instead of panic, you discover that emptiness never lasts as long as fear made it seem. There's a phrase that sums up everything that's been said here, and it's simple enough to fit in one breath. What disappears from your life in 5D isn't loss, it's cleansing. It is the removal of everything that kept you small, stuck, false, the drama-based relationships, the need for external validation, the tolerance of the drug, the fear of death, the consumerism, the competition, the addictions. None of that was you. It was layer, it was armor, it was the weight you carried thinking it was part of you, when in fact it was just what you had learned to carry. You're not losing, you're recovering. Each thing that disappears gives back a piece of energy that was being used to sustain something that was not useful. And that energy back is what fuels the new earth that is being built within you. The real connections, the inner peace, the authentic freedom, the full presence, the self-love that doesn't need approval to exist. Ascension is not a destination with a set date. It is an ongoing movement of becoming more true, more whole, more you. And every illusion that falls is a step in that direction. Trust what disappears. Trust in the emptiness that remains. Trust the process that no one warned you was going to happen, but that some part of you always knew was inevitable. All that is truly yours. The connections, the gifts, the purpose, the love never goes away. What goes away is only what never was. And when you really understand this, not only as a concept but as an experience, the word loss loses its meaning. What takes its place is something much more precise, much cleaner, much more real: freedom. You've come this far, and that says a lot about where you are. Most people run away from exactly this type of conversation because it messes with things that we prefer not to look at head on. But you stayed, and now comes the most important part of all this content. Knowledge that is not applied does not transform anything. It stays beautiful in the memory, generates a momentary insight and disappears, just like everything that does not vibrate at its frequency. The question is not whether you understood what was said here. The question is, what are you going to do with it now? So let's be direct. Look at your life today and answer honestly. Which of these 7 things are still taking up space that are not theirs? Is there still a relationship that you sustain out of habit, not genuine love? Is there still an environment that your body rejects, but your mind rationalizes as an obligation? Is there still a bias, a pattern, a need for external validation operating on autopilot while you pretend everything is fine? Because the vibrational mismatch is already at work, the only choice you have is to resist the process or honor it. The new earth is not a place you find. It is a frequency you build, decision by decision, release by release, presence by presence. Dimensional awakening does not happen all at once, in a snap. It happens in layers, and each layer asks for the courage to let go of what no longer serves. You already have the map. Now you need to walk. And if you want to continue learning about 5D consciousness, ascension, and everything no one has taught you about how your energy shapes your reality, subscribe to the channel and ring the bell. Because that was just the beginning, and what comes in the next few videos will further deepen what you have begun to awaken here.